Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos of Baltimore. We are Baltimore positively coming at you in expectations of a huge football game on Sunday. Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Ravens in Kansas City. That used to mean some delicious barbecue for me. It will mean some crab cakes for us, though. The Maryland Lottery puts us on the road along with Liberty Pure Solutions, our friends at Curio Wellness, GBMC putting us out on the road right now. And I will have the Raven scratch offs to give away. I'm putting together a Fadley's excursion as well as Costas in Timonium because it's close to home, as well as some new places as we get into October. And I don't have to worry about playoff baseball. And we have all sorts of weirdness this weekend with the Yankees and the Orioles and the Yankees in the bye and the Orioles playing spoiler and the Blue Jays doing whatever they're doing as well. But Luke and I are focused on football and Patrick Mahomes and Namde Madubuike. Luke, I can't begin to say, it's been 4 years since I've been thrown out by Chad Steele and John Harbaugh and the minions there, but I know how these short weeks go, especially after a loss, 1-2, big game, rival game, favorite on the road. I don't know, man. We beat them up pretty good, and then Tuesday afternoon happens quickly. That gives way to Wednesday, and they're practicing, and Taylor Swift might even be at the game on Sunday, huh?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that part of it, but it's always a little strange when you have a Monday night game. Anytime you have a prime time game, it kind of just throws the start of the week out of whack. John Harbaugh is trying to get these guys a little bit of extra rest because you take away one day from your normal week. So they started a little bit later in the day, Wednesday. But yeah, I think health continues to be such a big part of what we're talking about here. And, you have a big game. Both teams are 1-2. I mean, think about this. I mean, a month ago, if someone had told you that the Ravens and the Chiefs would be playing in week 4 and the loser would be 1-3, I mean, that'd be very surprising, regardless of early season schedule and all of that. But for the
If you box
Ravens,
that bet, you'd make a lot of money.
yeah, sure. I mean, not that either team's had a cakewalk of a schedule, obviously, but certainly lots of no shortage of urgency, at least as it pertains to week 4 for either team. But as I said, the story for the Ravens continues to be health. John Harbaugh did not have anything new to offer on Nnamdi Madubuike and the health of his neck, other than to say he's not playing on Sunday. So.
Well, you read Harbaugh ease as well as anyone. I can usually tell when he's BSing me. Always could. He hated that. It's one of the reasons he threw me out. But the level of concern and the look on his eyes and the mannerism of which this began late last week concerned all of you in the media, the real
Yeah.
media. I mean, even to the point where like I had Leonard Raskin and Dennis Kolatzos on this week, and it's great to visit with Dennis. It's been a while, and they both first thing they said to me, they're worried about Matabiki, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like before we even did radio or whatever. It's right. Like so, the rumblings through the fan base too, and maybe it's because we've seen Zach Orr, we've seen Sergio Kindle, we've seen players get injured, too injured to be able to play. Dennis Pitta, Todd Heap go through, great players that just kind of had it taken away from them maybe a little earlier in regard to not being able to do what they wanted to do. This has been very sudden, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's very unnerving. It's very unsettling because you just don't know. I mean, look, the good thing is everyone saw him Monday night on the sideline, right? He wasn't wearing a neck brace. It's not as though they're being so secretive that there's something extraordinarily wrong in terms of impacting his quality of life, right? But it's a neck injury, and they have been very clear not to say it was, just muscular or something like that, right? I mean, it's clear there's concern. John Harbaugh's acknowledged there's concern, but he hasn't been given the green light to comment on it. That generally means either evaluation is ongoing, which a lot of these types of things, it's not cut and dried all the time, right? Someone breaks a bone, someone tears a knee ligament, you can diagnose that very quickly. When you have something, and look, I mean, Zach Orr, and I'm not saying this is like Zach Orr, right? I mean, we don't know what the outcome's going to be here. In Zach Orr's case, keep in mind, He got hurt in that Christmas game, the Antonio Brown reaching over the goal line game back in 2016. He had he had a herniated disc. It was a different neck injury that he suffered in that game. It was through the evaluation and the imaging process of that that they then discovered he actually had a congenital spinal condition that they said you never should have been playing football all these years. I mean that was a risk for you. Thank goodness we've caught this, because this could have been a very, very bad outcome, well beyond football. So not at all suggesting this is like that, but when you are talking about a neck, you've got to be careful with that. To me, football, we know it's such a brutal game, right? But there are two types of injuries that are different than everything else. Head injuries, when we're talking more specifically concussions, and even that, it's taken us until the last 5 to 10 years to start taking those more seriously. And what we always have taken seriously, because we've always seen these situations in the history of the game. I mean, I go back to being a kid and Mike Utley, Dennis Byrd, right? I mean, you see these high profile neck injuries that don't happen every week, but you at least have some scares every season around the NFL, college football, at the high school level. I mean, all of that. So when something happens, even if it's not, oh, there was this big hit and he was carted off, or they strapped him to a backboard or anything like that, but he wakes up a day or two later and he's not feeling right, and the issues stemming to something with his neck, you've got to be really, really, really careful with that. Beyond, is Matabike going to play in week 3 or week 4, or is he going to be back in a month? You have to look at that very, very carefully. And in some cases, decisions have to be made. And I don't say that to imply that it's necessarily career threatening, but sometimes it's a case where we think you need to get this taken care of, and unfortunately, this might take you out of play for the rest of the season. Or in some cases, and I see this a lot as a professional wrestling fan, bear with me for a moment, where you've had plenty of wrestlers over the years have neck procedures, neck surgeries, things of that nature, and many of them are able to return to the ring after 9 months, 12 months, a year and a half. But there also have been individuals who could not do it anymore and had to retire. So when I say all that, I'm not saying all that for anyone listening right now to completely sound
Well,
the
most
alarm.
of our jobs don't involve our necks, right? I mean, they do on the
Precisely.
screens, and my neck's been a little weird. You can ask Dr. Steve about that. But in a general sense,
We're not in
um,
many car crashes on every single
correct.
play.
Yeah,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
not doing that kind of work,
So
right?
so that's where with John Harbaugh saying what he said to this point and not saying what he said to this point, uh, I I will buy that. And look, there's always the competitive element that every team kind of goes through with their injuries and all that. But for him to have ruled out Matabike and not played that gamesmanship kind of thing that John or any head coach plays around the league, it speaks to there's a sensitivity to this, and there's a thoroughness to this in terms of evaluating potentially some decisions that need to be made. And, I don't want to speculate beyond that, because, maybe he will be fine in 6 weeks. I don't know.
It is different
But
than a turf toe injury, though. Yes.
exactly, this
Yeah.
isn't, oh, can he play through a hamstring or, an ankle, a shoulder, I mean, I always think back to Peter Boulware and how he played with his shoulder kind of, in a harness for felt like most of his career, right? I mean, Ray Lewis had that back in '02 and '03, and but a neck, that you can't do that, right? I mean, at the very least, you have to make sure you have a complete understanding and idea that your head's complete. When you're the doctors and the training staff and the medical staff, and you seek other opinions, all that, you want to have a full picture of what you're dealing with. And in some cases, it can end up being fine. In other cases, it can be something where, Tavon Young was an example, had to have a neck surgery. He returned to play the next year, right? And even though he had an injury-plagued career, didn't necessarily have another issue with his neck after that. But we also know that, yes, there are sometimes cases where it does threaten someone's career and potentially can end their career. I mean, again, Zach Orr, that was a that was a congenital condition that was discovered in the process of him having done something else to his spine, where you kind of look at that injury and you say, for his life, that was a blessing in disguise that was caught, because if he had the wrong hit, I mean, doctors told him he could have been paralyzed or worse.
Worse. Yeah.
So that's why whenever you're talking, and I don't think, this, I haven't seen any fan chatter as far as like, why isn't he out there, like that kind of thing. I think everyone understands when you're talking about a neck issue, you've got to be extremely careful with that. So they're
That being said, he's not playing this
He's
week,
not. Yeah, he's not
and
playing, and as we can kind of pivot, because there's, I don't have anything more beyond that other than, John expressed concern. I think it's obvious they're concerned, right? And whether that's for the next month, whether that's for the rest of the season, or whether that's more than that, right? So you don't want to speculate too much, but you also don't want to say it's nothing either. But in the meantime, they don't have him Sunday, and unfortunately, they're further banged up on the defensive line. Travis Jones, who only played 2 snaps in the fourth quarter of Monday night's game. He's dealing with the knee. Actually limped off on that Jahmyr Gibbs fourth down touchdown on the very first play of the fourth quarter. And the only play he played after that was the first snap after the Derrick Henry fumble. And if you go back and look at the all 22, he really couldn't put any weight to kind of
he got off
fire
the
off,
field. Yeah.
and then he was off. So now I did not see him, but I know a couple other reporters did spot him in the locker room briefly. Seemed to be fine walking through. John Harbaugh indicated he and Broderick Washington, he feels at this early stage of the week when he was speaking on Wednesday that he was encouraged that they might be able to play, but we don't know. So in the meantime, no Matabike, Jones is banged up, Washington's banged up. The defensive line, other than John Jenkins, played horribly on Monday night as it was, but they did sign a pair of veteran defensive tackles, Taven Bryan, a former first-round pick once upon a time, and Josh Tupou, who was on their practice squad last year. So,
and they're really patching this together. I mean, starting with
yeah,
Jenkins, right, who still has some motor left in him. I mean, there's a guy that's been everywhere in the league, right?
yeah. So, I mean, we're gonna see how this plays out. John Jenkins he's gonna play. I mean, he played a lot on Monday night, and like I said, he was the one guy. When you go back and watch that, Travis Jones had a poor game. Broderick Washington was poor, but John Jenkins played well. They're gonna need, especially if Travis Jones's status is in some question here for Sunday. It's all hands on deck, and like I said, Brent Urban. I mean, there's a couple new guys on the practice squad. I mean, it's really a patchwork kind of defensive line
This
at
is
the
something
moment.
we did not envision, right? In week 4,
Um,
we'd be talking about this as a deficiency. You didn't like the linebacking core so much. We had questions about the depth of the
yeah,
secondary and where young
I
players would fit in. But this hasn't looked good for Humphrey, who's injured. It hasn't looked good for Hamilton. It hasn't looked great for Roquan, although he was shot out of a gun in the Cleveland game, right? Like, and what it means when you're getting bowl over and teams want to run the ball, that they're going to try to run the ball. And I'm not saying that Kansas City, Houston, or the Rams are going to be that the next couple of weeks, but they're going to get tested now.
sure.
And it is a weakness. It went from something as a perceived, if not strength, at least stable, to something that feels very unstable right now. And when your running game's unstable, you can't get the ball back for Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, this is a concern. I mean, it's not unstable. It's been terrible so far. I mean, when you're
32, 32nd.
there, I mean, these are just raw numbers. And look, are they going to get better defensively? Well, a lot of that pertains to the health of their defensive line, but I'm guessing they will. But at the same time, relative to expectations, I mean, we were thinking this had the chance to be a top 5 defense. Now, one thing I did want to address, if you go back and listen to our conversations, or what I was writing back in the spring, say around draft time, I did talk a little bit, and let me be clear, I wasn't alone in this. The defensive line depth was something that I talked about in terms of, okay, you've Matabike you love, Travis Jones you really like, right? I mean, ankle injury last year aside that he was playing through, we've seen him be a guy who looks like he could be a guy, right? Someone that can be an above average player. But we acknowledge that Michael Pierce retired. We acknowledge that Brent Urban was another year older and whether he was going to be in the plans or not. And, he's on the practice squad right now. We acknowledge that, and what my big surprise was when you think back to how this draft was regarded in terms of defensive line, they didn't take a defensive lineman until so they took Aeneas Peebles in the 6th round, right? And he's an undersized kind of tweener. When you watch him, he flashes as a guy that could be a situational inside pass rusher for you, but it's not necessarily a guy you want out there for early downs. I mean, he's just small. He's going to get pushed around by a physical offensive line like Detroit. So, that they're going to have to figure this out. But you look at the numbers, that it's not beating them up. The numbers are what they are, and I get it. They played Buffalo and Detroit. As I said, coming out of Monday night's game, when it's all said and done from 2025, who knows? Maybe Buffalo plays Detroit in the Super Bowl. I mean, that certainly can happen. So it's not as though there's this great shame in losing to Buffalo or Detroit, but I think it's the manner in which it's occurred that's so alarming. Week 1, the blown lead, and going back to that narrative, and week 3, I mean, they were just bullied, right? But
the alarming part is whether they're a good team or not, and we're questioning that now and saying if you can't stop the run, special teams have been so-so, quarterback's outstanding, but you got no running game. And the offensive line hasn't really been able to open up the kind of holes in the running game to create the kind of creativity you'd like. Now, no Likely, no Ricard, no big boy ball. Henry's either lost a step, has no holes, fumbling the ball.
Just hold on to the football. Hold on to the football, period. But
all the potential of the ceiling is still Willy Wonka and glass ceiling and all of that. But the reality of 1 and 2 and the reality of their injuries, their weaknesses, their exposures, and the fact that I don't know where the leak stops because Matabike's not coming. They're not going to get that kind of play from their defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not coming back, that's absolutely
the pass
a problem.
rush.
Sure. I mean, no question.
I would just say front 7 problems, whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's Marlon Humphrey hasn't played well, and you kind of now I think their outside corners have played well. Hamilton wasn't good on Monday night, but it's Kyle Hamilton. I'm not worried about him. But yeah, they have issues, and the one thing I'll push back on a little bit, they're a good team. I don't have any doubts about that. Even as
wake me up Monday morning if they're 1 and 3, are they a good team?
Yes, okay. Because you're still talking about you still have to consider the competition. The question is, are you a great team? Are you a team that's as presently constructed a Super Bowl contender? That is coming into question with these issues, right?
Dude, I'll go to war with you on Monday if they're 1 and 3 and having lost to the 3 good teams they've played, and if they lose in some sort of 10-point convincing fashion, and Mahomes looks like
you can say they stink, and I'm going to say
I'm not going to say they stink. I'm going to say I'm going to push back on whether they're a good team at 1 and 3. I just because I
get into semantics.
My eyes tell me that. You know what I'm saying? Like wherever they are on the power rankings doesn't matter.
Eyes tell me they're playing great, but they've also played great teams. They're not losing to, they didn't lose to Cleveland.
Well, that's part of their problem in January, isn't it?
Sure. Well, but we're going to get no question. I'm saying someone's a good team doesn't mean you think they're going to win the Super Bowl, right? And that's what we're talking about here. But
I'm not trying to be persnickety, but don't sell me line to anything. They lose. They're 1 and 3 on Monday, and they're 1 and 3, and that's below the bar, John. Right?
I'm not saying it's not. I'm telling you what I think they're. I'm going to project out what I still think they're going to be, and we're getting into semantics here, right?
Well, they're a favorite in Kansas City on the road in the place they've never won against a Jedi quarterback, and people still believe in them, right?
So I'm so tired of talking about Vegas and DVOA and EPA, and I'm so done with all of that. I just go win football games.
Don't fumble in key situations, right?
Yeah. And that's funny because I almost sound contradictory to push back on what you just said. Look, I think they're a good team. Even if they lose Sunday, I'll tell you right now, I still think they'll recover to win the division. But at some point, then it's just okay. So what's that mean for December? What's that mean for January? You're already in a position where, if you're 1 and 3 and Buffalo's 4 and 0, the number one seed's already looking very, very grim
Well,
of
they're
any
going to get
shot of
measured
that.
late in the year too. I aired early in the week thinking they
Sure.
played Green Bay on Christmas. They played Green Bay Christmas week
Oh,
on the
that, I
road.
mean, the same week. Yeah.
But they're going to go to Minnesota late. Pittsburgh's going to be a real thing, I think, by the time they see Pittsburgh. So they're going to have games in November and December that they're not going to have some 8-game winning streak like the Bills, and you're just going to say, well, they're just good. They have to go out and prove they're good against good teams.
Sure.
They haven't done that this month for sure. And if
Yeah.
they're 1-3 on Monday, um, they're 1-3. I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't expect them to win on Sunday because I remember the legend of the Chiefs, and I
Yeah.
know that thing's kind of tarnished. But I
Well,
also know, like, they're going to get run on. I know what this front seven looks like right now and how shaky this thing. I don't say it's built on a house of cards, but it was built on Matabike, Roquan, and Marlon Humphrey around Kyle Hamilton. And when Hamilton's not playing well, it sort of says to me there was nothing happening in front of him, allowing him to play either position particularly well. And I think he is inclined to be Superman.
yeah. Well, you talk about him or Roquan Smith. I mean, I I think a couple things. One, this whole look ahead thing that you and I can do, they can't be thinking in those terms, right? And they've heard all off season, and these guys hear the noise, right? And they'll brush off anything that's complimentary, and they're quick to point out anything that's negative, right? So they hear everything, but you got to win Sunday. It's just that simple. The difference here, both teams are 1-2. Kansas City has even more urgency than the Ravens do right now because they actually play in a division where you look at the Chargers look way better than anything else in the AFC North that the Ravens are facing. And they've already lost to the Chargers. So 1-3 for Kansas City is far more dire in terms of their division and wanting to win the division than even what the Ravens face if they're 1-3. Because no one believes in the Bengals at this point.
Well, you beat the Chiefs.
They're
That's one place you won't have to go back to in January, right? Beat the Chiefs. They're in
not
bad shape to
necessarily,
be
but you have a
hosting
tiebreaker.
games
Sure.
in.
Sure.
But I mean, in just winning their own division.
Oh, no,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So
So,
I hadn't thought about that, but that's why we talk about this stuff together.
but yeah, but that's where you look at this thing and you say, normally, if you say you're 1-2 and going to Kansas City, I mean, look, urgency's high for both these teams, but mathematically speaking, forget about number one seed or anything like that, but just your division. Kansas City's in deep, you know what, if they lose on Sunday. Assuming the Chargers don't start charging it up, which I guess, it's in the DNA of their franchise, but it doesn't feel quite as much that way under Jim Harbaugh.
Well, the
But
questions in Kansas City Monday is, are they a good team if they're 1-3, right?
sure,
Same thing,
sure,
right?
sure. So, I mean, it's,
Man, the
there's
stakes are high in this, right? Somebody gonna be
for
salty on
week
Monday
four.
morning, huh?
Yeah, for week four, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's always a big game when you're going up against a team like that anyway. But when you're 1-2 and you're banged up, I mentioned the defensive line. Van Noy's still not practicing. The assumption is he's not going to play. Pat Ricard's still out. I think we've seen the Pat Ricard thing show up, not necessarily with their entire running game on the entire, over the entire field, because it's not as though Ricard plays every down, every snap. But I think we've talked about some of the head scratching stuff you've seen in goal to go situations. Patrick
I
Ricard's
think
part of that big
Ricard
time.
doing things that
Assist him.
allowed Lamar to run or gave Lamar one more block or one more chip or one more second to be Lamar, that there's a reason they've kept that cat around, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, even if it's 20 or 25 snaps a game, it's 20 or 25 snaps a game. So I think their goal to go stuff has absolutely been impacted by Ricard not being on the field. So
What are they good at, dude? I mean, seriously, like going into this,
as a team,
that freight train
they lead the league in
thing,
scoring.
that freight train thing they did the first 3 quarters in Buffalo.
Okay, but they
That's
lead the league in scoring, though. Like, let's not. Again, this is why I'm pushing back on your comment about, are they a good team? Yeah, they're a good team. They're very flawed, though, and what their flaws have been major flaws, right? But at the same time, their offense, it's been high variance in the way that it's been incredible at times, and then other times it's looked not great, right? And
well, that's first down efficiency.
Sure, sure.
Literally, I mean, for all of these 8 years, 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2, like, first and 15, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 12, 2nd and 19, 2nd and 10 on an incomplete or a nothing play, 2nd and 8 if Henry gets stuffed or whatever. Been a lot of that through 3 weeks. A lot too much, quite frankly.
There has. At the same time, they're first in the league in third down offense. So they've converted their thirds, but at
Well, you give
times,
them
yeah.
enough chances. They get put enough bullets in the gun, they'll get you, right?
But I'm just saying, I mean, that there have been times where their offense has been absolutely humming, right? I mean, their offense has been excellent overall. Like when you look at the entire body of work, the production, but within that, you've seen stretches of time where it's really faltered at the worst times.
And they've
Well, it's
also scored points where the defense hasn't taken the ball away 3 times and given them 17 points for the scoreboard.
in,
For the
Cle- in
most.
Cle- that happened against Cleveland, but yeah, the first couple, the other two games, I mean, their defense didn't have any takeaways. I mean, they had no sacks of Jared
It's
Goff on
earned
Monday night.
offense, kind of like
Yeah,
the other night when they went 98 yards and 95 yards down the field. That's earned offense when you go the length of the field and do that. But it's also flawed defense, man. Like we
well,
haven't
sure.
seen anything like that ever here, ever. Ray
Uh,
Lewis and those guys wouldn't allow that. And the
I mean, you have
soul
to go.
searching I saw in the locker room after the game, for Chad Steele throwing me out and all that, it's where I learn the most is when I walk in there and see a sullen Marlon Humphrey and a contrite a Derrick Henry and a pissed off, quizzical Lamar and a sort of embarrassed John Harbaugh, I think, to some degree.
Sure. I absolutely think that. I mean, when you give up over 200 rushing yards at home, when you give up two 95 plus yard drives at home, look, Detroit's a heck of a football team, but they did to the Ravens what the Ravens are accustomed to doing, even to some good teams over the course of the regular season. Now, January, a different discussion, but I mean, you think back to what happened to Detroit when they came into Baltimore 2 years ago and how completely different it was this time around. It's a credit to them, but it's also a statement of where the Ravens are right now. I mean, their defense, even last year, with all the issues they had on the back end of the secondary and giving up big plays, they stopped the run. Even early last year, they stopped the run at a very high level. For them to be right now going into week 4, 32nd in total defense, 30th in rush defense, 31st in pass defense, 31st in scoring defense, 24th in third down defense, tied for 21st in fourth down defense. Very small sample, but
Where
hey,
are they in
Detroit
quarterback pressures and sacks?
near the bottom. I mean,
Yeah.
they haven't against Cleveland. What they have 3 sacks so far. I mean, Joe Flacco was throwing the ball away so quickly, and I mean, we saw how that worked. So I had no issue with how their defense played against Cleveland, but it's Cleveland. Like, no disrespect to Joe, but he's 40 years old. Like he may not start for another team in the National Football League. I mean, that's what you're talking about there. So that's the only game that your defense has to hang their hat on whatsoever. I mean, I get it. Buffalo and Detroit or not, that's still doesn't mean you can be last. I mean, I understand. As I said to you in the aftermath of that Bills game, through 3 quarters, their defense, there was plenty to clean up, but it's the Bills. It's Josh Allen. I understand that. On Monday night, it's Jared Goff and the Lions and all these skill players they have. By no means did I expect them to hold those teams to 10 points, right? I mean, we need to be realistic. It's not 2000 anymore. Even the best defenses in the National Football League in 2025 are going to give up points against elite offenses. But it's the sheer nature of how it's happened. In the case of week 1, the fourth quarter, they got completely just annihilated. And over the course of Monday night's game, just physically, especially as the game went on, the Detroit running between the tackles the way they did. I mean, you just don't see that
Well, I want to
against the
see where the
Ravens
mismatches
defense.
are this week. I mean, I mentioned, Tyreek Hill's not around anymore. That created like a ridiculous
Yeah,
mismatch, along with Kelsey being that guy. I don't know where they are with Hollywood and Kareem Hunt, and just in general, that offensive line that they've been for 5 years in Kansas City trying to catch up. They have Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I'll give you Lamar. Lamar's fine and all that. Mahomes has won a couple of these, so I'm still going to put him
Lamar
a
is
touch
great,
above,
but
you
Mahomes
know,
is
at this
above. Yeah,
point.
sure,
But
fine.
but when everything falls apart around you, and a note to Lamar that, when the Batemans and the Andrews and the Zays and the Derrick Henrys aren't there, and you're trying to do it yourself, as Flacco found out once he was making too much money against the cap. The Chiefs don't have those mismatches, don't have that big boy football that maybe they had 5 years ago. And certainly the mystique's off at 1-2 from where they are. But I don't know, for this outfit to go out there, they've not had a lot of success out there at stopping Patrick Mahomes. I wonder where the mismatches are. And is this the week Travis Kelce catches 12 balls for Taylor and finds the fountain of something else? Because they haven't performed well against it. I mean, the championship game, they were within the realm of winning that 2 years ago. But these rosters have changed so much, and I do wonder what the Chiefs are going to try to do. And I know this: Spagnuolo has been up for years trying to keep a guy like Lamar down and having scheme for that, maybe not having players for that. But this is a fascinating matchup, going right to Andy and John too. And the whole
Sure.
history there, and Spagnuolo and John, and the whole friendship there, and all of that. This is a weird, big, large game on a Sunday afternoon for this time of the year for white knuckling for our fan base. And they've got trophies over there. So, like, if it falls apart on them, at some point it was going to, and maybe this is the time it does, and they get surpassed by the Chargers, and they become the 9-8 team this year, trying to flip it around and figure it out, and get Travis to go off and get married and figure out how they move to Mahomes 2.0. But Lamar 2.0 is missing like 2, 3 rings and a couple of losses in Super Bowls that he has. And this is a measurement week for the Ravens franchise, but for Kansas City too, to say, we're still here and we're still
Yeah,
your daddy, and you're not coming into our place as a favorite and winning.
fair enough. I mean, there's absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely a what's under the hood kind of game for both these teams, right? To your point, I mean, clearly the Chiefs have the cachet, the experience, the January success, the Super Bowl rings, all of that. But as I said, they fall to 1-3, and the Chargers keep kind of rolling the way they have early on. I mean, man, they're in a hole. There's no doubt. Whereas I think the difference for the Ravens, it's much more the mental part of it and where you are physically with some of these injuries and another loss to Kansas City. And then you're in a position where you're 1-3. That's bad enough. But you also look at it in terms of you're 1-3 and you lost to Buffalo and Kansas City. And then Detroit's one of the best teams in the NFC. So you're absolutely doubting yourself, regardless of the division, because I don't think Pittsburgh's very good. Cincinnati's in deep, you know what, right? I mean,
Oh, I think if you get to 10, you win the division, but I
that's
don't
what I'm
know
saying. I mean,
what the
like,
level of confidence
but,
is in December to be
but
playing well.
yeah, exactly. The goal isn't for this team to win the division. Yes, that's a goal. Let me be clear. And they have to think about it in terms of one game at a time. But like, you know, they start 1-3 and then they win four in a row after that. Is anyone going to say, oh, well, you'll say they're fine in the scope of the playoff
If they
race,
get themselves to 5-3 or 6-4, fair
but
enough.
but a bit in a big picture sense, how are you going to feel about it, right? I mean, I as I kind of wrote at BaltimorePositive.com, I mean, this is it's the blessing and the curse of where the Ravens are, right? The blessing is that they've been in this rare space regular season wise where they've had these great teams in the regular season and they've won games and they've won divisions and they've had they've been the number one seed a couple times, all that. But the curse is you don't have the January resume to back it up. So you go through the regular season and even with everyone singing your praises, I mean, how many people picked them to win the Super Bowl? They were the very popular pick amongst national media and
Well,
pundits.
dude,
And
if they're gonna make the
but
playoffs, there better be some sunshine here in October, November.
I
Like
mean,
we
at
better
some
start having
point,
some
yeah,
happier Monday mornings.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, and like I said, I mean, if they're 1-3, I still think they regroup to make the playoffs and all that. But I mean, man, where are they? Where are they going? Is this thing? John Harbaugh likes to, I think it's an old Bo Schembechler quote, but I think you can attribute it to many people. But he said it over the years: you're either getting better or getting worse. this team feels like it's getting worse right now, right? And at least compared to what the standard has been in the regular season.
Well, you're
So
asking me whether they're going to be 6-3 or 6-4 or 7-5 or whatever
this
they're going to be. That a lot of that to me is tell me how Matabike's neck is.
that's fair. That's fair. I mean,
Because if they're going to play the rest of the year without him and something else is going to go wrong, because they're not going to be adding players.
yeah. Well,
And I'm waiting for the emerging young players to step up and say, hey, Wiggins, gonna have to pay him, get Starks, ooh, good draft pick. The way we looked at Hamilton that way, or the way we looked at Marlon Humphrey that way early on, to say that's a good draft pick, that's an ascending player. With losses come ascending and descending players too,
sure.
right? I don't think Derrick Henry's slower, not fast, not good, not the fumble thing aside, or even fumble prone, but like I'm not seeing the offensive line open the holes. I'm not seeing the scheming. I'm not seeing that being generated the last 2 weeks. And maybe
Yeah.
some of that's just Cleveland being very good and Detroit being very good.
Yeah. And again, and that's kind of my point when, going back to the 1-3 thing, are they a good team? Like that's kind of my point, considering the competition. But at the same time, look, even Derrick Henry, look, he can look great running the ball, but if he's going to put it on the ground every game, that's a problem. I mean, you can't have that. I'm not saying that means you bench him, but that's a problem. So yeah, they've got to figure this out. And even I hear what you're saying about Matabike, but come on. This team played games without Ray Lewis and Ed Reed when they were in their prime. That doesn't give you license to be the worst defense in the league then. I mean, come on. You got to and I don't say this to sound tough because they're having these conversations. Amongst themselves they're saying we got to man up. Like, can't give up 230 yards on the ground. I mean, come on now. We're the Ravens playing at home. How does that happen? So yeah, they've got to figure that out. I mean, and people will point to John Harbaugh and Zach Orr big time. And look, I'll hear calls at certain times or, you know, personnel groupings at certain times, whatever, but go back and watch it. They were physically beaten on Monday night. Guys weren't getting off blocks. Guys were missing tackles. That's not all on coaching. You got high priced players playing at every level. Maybe not the defensive line now with Matabike out, but because I mean, you're talking about guys that are on rookie deals or veteran kind of journeyman type guys. But I mean, got to man up. I mean, it hurts not having Matabike. It hurts not having Kyle Van Noy. Again, no one was expecting them to hold Detroit to 13 points.
And what's
But
Mahomes going to do about that?
well, but this is where, and maybe as we kind of look forward rather than keep looking
You're
back,
playing the most decorated quarterback on
you
earth.
are, but he's 1-2, and their offenses looked very extremely pedestrian so far. I mean, now I'll point out Xavier Worthy was a full participant on Wednesday. He practiced last week. Looks like that shoulder. I think it looks like he's going to be back in the picture.
Well, they need to win.
I mean, they need to, but they need to score points because their defense, even these defenses doing a better job against the Ravens than maybe you anticipate. They're not the Ravens aren't getting shut out, so they have to score points. But their run game, Isaiah Pacheco is averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Their run game has been led by Mahomes scrambling. That's we've talked about that a lot with Lamar over the years. That's not tenable in terms of like how you want to. That's the only
Well,
way you
Mahomes
can
is
run
getting
the
older
ball.
too, and you don't want him getting gimped up. I mean, he
Sure,
spent the first half of
exactly.
his career limping, as I remember it.
I mean, sure. So, they have Hollywood Brown. He's been okay. Tyquan Thornton's really been the guy that's kind of emerged for them the last couple of weeks, to actually make some plays. Kelsey's kind of been a net negative. Now, will that change against the Ravens? You kind of look at the Ravens defense, and it's funny because I wanted to mention this because you
Well, he's
mentioned
going to the Hall of Fame, right? Travis
he is,
Kelsey, right?
but he's not in his prime anymore at this point in time. But that's not to say he won't look like it on Sunday if the Ravens have issues over the middle of the field like they did this past week. So, but you mentioned Nate Wiggins. In my mind, there were three guys that played well on Monday night on the Ravens defense. John Jenkins, he's the one defensive lineman who played well. So that was good. At least someone played well in that group. And the other guys I thought played well. I thought Nate Wiggins and Awuzie on the outside. I think their outside corner play has been at least fine, and I think it's been good. I think Nate Wiggins has played well. How about the fact we talk all the time about guys needing to make plays in crunch time? Who was the one guy on the Ravens defense that made a play very late in the game that looked like it might be pivotal for them? Wiggins was the one who broke up that last 2-point conversion for Buffalo. So he made a play. He made a play when they forced a three and out in the fourth quarter. He had the big break up on second down. I like what I've seen from Wiggins. You know what? When we're talking about this defense right now, and there's not a whole lot of positive, I think Wiggins has played well. Now that said, he's going to be tested on the outside if Xavier Worthy is back. Tyquan Thornton is
Well,
starting
especially if
to
you're not going
threat,
to get a pass rush on Mahomes, right?
and that's the big thing. I mean, we talked about it a lot with Goff, right?
You're giving me all that Mahomes been scrambling Mahomes. You better make him scramble.
You better make him sprint. But the difference, and we saw this with Josh Allen. You can't let him get out either, and that's where I have my doubts about the edge play without Van Noy. So, they're gonna have to score plenty of points. Spagnuolo's going to have a plan for them. Their defense is pretty healthy. I think Mike Dana, their defensive end, was the only guy that was even limited in the first practice of the week. So they're healthy on defense. Again, look at their statistical profile. They've been very middling. They're 17th in total offense. They're tied for 11th in total defense. Kansas City's been very mediocre. The Ravens have been the extremes, right? The Ravens have looked fantastic at times, and then other times you're like, oh my, what is this? Kansas City's just kind of looked, it's not like the Chargers
They're a
are the
2.5-point underdog at home.
Sure. So it speaks to what Vegas, it speaks to what Vegas still thinks about the Ravens, which, as I said, okay, but it speaks to where Kansas City is. But this game is at Arrowhead. And as I said, as much as we're thinking the Ravens have this urgency, Kansas City's urgency level is even higher because
the perception is the Ravens have eclipsed them somehow, and I don't know what they've witnessed other than maybe they watched the first half of the Buffalo game and see that potential for the Ravens. We all see the potential for the Ravens, but they haven't done it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I don't think anyone necessarily thinks that they've surpassed, for whatever a line in Vegas is worth. I mean, okay,
it's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars of confidence.
Oh, it was, but they also said the Ravens were favored over Detroit. So what do they know? It's
the perception is that the Chiefs are a diminished version of themselves, and
they have been so far. They're 1-2, and they haven't looked like at least in the Ravens case, that Buffalo game was such a freaky low, 1% kind of outcome that had to happen for that to, that was miraculous, borderline miraculous how Buffalo came back in that game. When you think about it,
it's almost like the Cleveland Guardians or something.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Which we'll get to that at some point because that's just been extraordinary. but in the case of Kansas City, they weren't blown out by the Chargers and they weren't blown out by the Eagles, but you kind of looked at those games and you're just kind of like, you're waiting, like, okay, are you going to do your Chiefs stuff, like your voodoo stuff that everyone talks about? Like, hey, you're losing. And then you make a big play. Mahomes does some kind of crazy Mahomes magician thing and you pull out a 3-point win.
We thought that when the Ravens had a 4-point lead late in the game the other night too, right?
Yeah. I mean, what against Detroit? I mean, yeah. Well, they were trailing by 4. They were leading early in the third quarter, but sure, when they got they made Detroit punt, and you're thinking, all right, they've got the ball. They're going to drive down the field and at least take the lead, and then we're going to have a heck of a final 6 minutes of this game. And then Derrick Henry gets the ball punched out.
I'll be stunned if the Chiefs stink on Sunday. And there's a lot of 3-and-outs, and there's 8 punts, and the Chiefs score 19 points. I see the over-under's 48.5, and I'm thinking, well, the Ravens are good for 30 of that. You know what I mean? 40, as I see it, in a general sense, the Ravens will score on Sunday, I guess. But over-under's 48.5. The Ravens are a 2.5-point favorite. And I'm not one of those guys. We don't ever talk point spreads around here. It's not what we do. Yeah. But it is a perception of where the Ravens are, and they haven't been all that impressive, and where the Chiefs are, who have not been impressive at all, and where they are at home, and where Mahomes and Lamar are, and where the supporting casts are, and I don't know. I don't see it this way, but wake me up on Monday morning when the Chiefs just stink, and I'll say, all right, they're done in the way that I felt that way about late Patriots or any empire when it's on its way out. You know what I mean? I've seen them
Yeah, I
all in
mean,
every sport. Pick any sport you want. When the empire's over with, this is a chance for the Ravens to end their empire out there. Go out there and beat them 30-17 and take the ball
I
away. And
that might be a little premature. But in terms of them being the number one seed, or in terms of them winning their division, they might have to do it in being a wild card. I'm not ready to bury. That's it's Either of these teams are 1-3. Like, yeah, they're in deep trouble relative to what their ultimate goal is, to be the number one seed, or in Kansas City's case, to still win their division. But I'm not burying the Chiefs, even if they're 1-3. I mean, I'm just not, in the same way that I'm not going to bury the Ravens in the context of, if they're 1-3, that they're like, that they're destined to have a 7-10
look, I don't know
season.
you to be the apologist, but the lead story to me here as we wrap this up, and we'll talk some more about it, and we certainly go watch football, is that they're both good teams on Monday morning, no matter what happens. They're both good teams, credible teams Monday morning, no matter the outcome. And I don't disagree with that. If somebody gets their ass kicked on Sunday, you're going to have a harder time telling me they're still a good football team at 1-3 if they don't look good in this game, because neither
I'm
one of these teams have.
I'm saying that through the lens of 13 games to go, Nestor. I mean, if you want to say the Kansas City Chiefs are dead when they're 1-3, I mean, okay, we'll revisit that in 3 months, and we'll see. And same thing for the Ravens. But that said, of course, it's a very important game. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, whoop-de-doo." I'm just, it's also September. It's
Well, the
September. This
difference with
isn't
this also is
January.
if you believe the Ravens are going to win their division, then you believe that the Ravens are going to have a home game, right? And I can agree. I will agree wholeheartedly that I
That's way
believe the
more
Ravens.
about the rest of the division right now
Okay,
than
so
me
you
thinking
beat
the
the
Ravens are
Chiefs
great.
here. The Chiefs will be the team coming here in January. We get a home game, great. We get a home game, but Patrick Mahomes comes in. I wouldn't, beating them on Sunday has nothing to do, much like the Bills last year. Beating them in late September has nothing
Has
to do
nothing to do
with
with January. I
January.
agree.
But I like a whole lot better that beating the Chiefs puts them underwater in their own division,
Sure,
takes them
sure.
out of the idea of the you would have to go there instead of putting on palm trees for an AFC powder puff game with Harbaugh's brother on a 74-degree day at SoFi Stadium, where anybody on the West Coast can go out and steal a ticket for $100 and go see the Ravens play a championship game, because the Chargers, that would be a favorable circumstance to see the Chargers in an AFC championship game, and that's the best the Ravens can hope for at 1-2. At this point, is like, all right, so we go through Los Angeles and not Buffalo in January, because that's all I can talk about is who are you playing in January and where, not are you 1-3 on Monday morning, although we will cross that bridge if they get there. If
I
they're
mean,
one and
one
one
of
and
those
three on
teams is
Monday morning, we're not going to be talking about January all of a sudden.
one of those teams are going to be 1-3. Yeah, and I'm just, my point about that is, you're not going to get me to speak in absolutes about 4 games into the season. Like, I mean, you're just not.
What is a good sample size? I'll just say that. All right, Luke's going to be watching the game on Sunday. We're going to be arguing on Monday. We're going to talk baseball over the weekend as well. My big thanks to Curio Wellness for sponsoring our 27th anniversary. I've even got my logo up now. We're going to have it on the website. It's going to be perfect. And we've been eating food, and we're doing the countdown of tasting this, and I'm going to continue to eat food, including crab cakes. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road, brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. Also, GBMC piling on. Did a piece this week about diabetes, which, my wife and Mark Andrews with the Dexcom and all that stuff going on. We're going to get the Crab Cake Tour back out to Costas, Coco's, and Fadley's in the coming weeks. I'm looking forward to that. We're also going to get back over to State Fair with Ev. We had a great show at the Beaumont last week. If you caught that, all of that is up at Baltimore Positive. Luke is running around making sure we have everything first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. Injury reports. Nnamdi Madubuike. Where's the pass rush coming from? Oh, they're playing Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, and they're supposed to win on Sunday. We'll see. I'm Nestor. He's Luke. We are WNST. AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Our purple therapy continues. We're Baltimore Positive.